Good, I think we're ready to go. I'm so happy to have you all here. Adina creates platforms that harness the potential of emerging technologies and empower bottom-up movements, and something that we definitely need in our moment of economic, ecological, and political crisis somehow more than ever to create change. And Adina is currently developing a climate and environmental action platform called ÆRTH, which we'll learn more about in this session. And she has previously worked as a creative advisor to leading NGO Conservation International, to help the organization to spark global engagement. And as the curator of the conference Parley for the Ocean, on behalf of Pharrell Williams and Bionic Yuan, Adina investigated biomimicry-based materials for a sustainable future of product. Her artistic work, yes, she's also an artist, has been exhibited at Art Basel Miami, Venice Biennale, and she was a recipient of the Palais de Tokyo grant in Paris. And with a creative, conceptual, and activist perspective, I'm delighted to have her to start this series on cultural production, the coronavirus, and the Anthropocene. It sounds like a great book title or film or something, right? But I'm going to reverse it, and we're going to start with the Anthropocene. Okay, Adina, let's start with this. So, well, the Anthropocene is usually defined as our current period in which humans and technological activities of industrial humanity becomes the dominating influence force on Earth. In this new situation, unsustainable patterns of production, consumption, population growth are challenging the resilience of the planet to support human activity. So what does the Anthropocene mean for our understanding of technology today? And does this era demand a complete rethinking of technology and how humans have used it throughout history? Adina.
I mean, that's a really big question. Technologies is not a new thing. I mean, you know, like I studied philosophy, and in the history of philosophy, it's an old Greek word, and it was called techne. And techne was the word that was used for any form of, like, even Hegel in the 18th century used it to describe interfaces. You know, like, for example, he said if you put a stick into water, it basically translates the image, and on the other side of the interface we experience something else. So humans have always altered and had an idea of how we were altering our reality, our relationship to the planet and the planet itself. In India, farmers have been, you know, farming and basically genetically engineering the basmati rice for over 600 years. It is only now that we understand that techne and technology has become such a prevalent tool, and it's the same tools that are being used by 7 billion people on the planet at the same time. Mm-hmm. Now this is of course hitting a limit, and we're running into a problem, for sure.
Do you see a gradual shift to something which is more invasive or more centralized, and this form more disconnected, or how do you see the evolution of technology in this?
I mean, for sure, because I think it's a difference if you have basically a community, let's say a tribe. They have a techne as well. They have also technology. They have developed technologies of how they basically live in line with their resource pools, how they protect those resource pools, how they harness for their own consumption. Now, there's a big difference if you have basically local technologies that are applied in communication with the local environment, or if you have abstract tools that are basically developed somewhere in Silicon Valley, or regulations that are developed in Geneva that are basically put top down, notwithstanding the differences of ecosystems and losing the knowledge about the granularity and the specificity of those ecosystems. So this is what we're seeing today, is that we're actually creating, you know, like maybe like only just a small pool of centralized tool providers, mm-hmm. and centralized systems that are now basically top down being applied to everywhere in the same way, and that creates a huge disconnect.
Yeah. Talking about this disconnection, or actually this you said it was like invasive or overly centralized also sometimes. How do you see this in the cultural sector today, this invasion or this centralization of technology?
I mean, it's very easy. You can look at the last 10 years of cultural production. It has mainly moved to social media. We're all, you know, it's like what Marshall McLuhan called the medium is the massage, the medium is the message, right? I mean, it is the interface that is basically converging all the voices and are filtering them into one and the same look or feel or message. So if we take Facebook, for instance, Facebook is such a strongly formatted platform that it only allows you to express 5 different emotions. Twitter gives you only that many words. This is already a form of basically, you know, like formatting our expressions and the way we communicate with each other. It's the same with cameras. You know, I'm sure that you know, Van Gogh's paint is most likely the most original and unaltered that we can see. If I now, as an artist, do a video piece and I choose certain colors, they look different on every computer. They will look different on every, so basically the interfaces are modulating our creativity and are streamlining them, which means that what is lacking is diversity or hetero, like some kind of a, like different forms of expressions of different voices, because everybody's using the same tools.
You were talking about social media. We know that Oculus, it is owned by a social media company that you already named. And I want to come back to this disconnection aspect you were saying before. I'm talking about VR with Oculus. Do you think this is also a technology which is actually disconnecting us from reality? Or is it the contrary, because of the immersion, or because being an empathy machine, even if this is quite controversial, but does it, at the contrary, connect us to environment, to people, maybe to ourselves? How do you see this with the VR, with the virtuality?
Well, you know that my history is in VR, and I
know.
I was very early in VR, and I got to work with incredible people in Los Angeles, and I was so excited about it because when I entered VR, I was an artist. So I was really seeing VR as very inspired actually by Jaron Lanier, as a possibility to experience something outside of my normal sensory experience. You know, I wanted to visualize music and test if I can visualize or feel infrared ultrasound. I wanted to see how actually we can alter our usually so locked in perspective on the planet and on the world, right? I worked extensively on the creation of 360 videos that put people into the, you know, maybe into the shoes of someone who's far away in the Amazon and experiencing the degradation of their ecosystem. I now think that we kind of lost that a little bit, because virtual reality was extremely fastly co-opted by the same companies. The content that is being put out is, I find, extremely underwhelming. It's mainly just games, violence, sex, and just boring stuff, and nothing is really allowing what this tool actually has the potential to do, which is to experience whole new different forms of perspectives, and that didn't happen, unfortunately. Yeah.
I know, because I see the guest list. I know that we have VR experts here, which is great. So in case you want to write questions or comments in the chat, you can do that, and we'll come back to you later on if you like, right? Also, when you have the idea right away during the talk, that's no problem at all. Okay, so going on to the question of centralization and decentralization, which is also super interesting. And I wonder if this provides us an entry point to consider our current situation. As we try to understand the pandemic today, many thinkers have drawn parallels between the Anthropocene and climate change. And yeah, there is probably some hope with swift emergency measures which have been taken by governments and progressive policy reform that suggests us that, yeah, maybe political change is possible. On the other hand, not everything was great, and some things were much too slow, are still much too slow, and we can think that politicians will fail to deal with climate change. I wanted to cite maybe like Michelle Wucker. I mean, well, you know, she wrote this book, Grey Rhinoceros. Maybe Joe, maybe we can put this in the chat for people who are interested. I mean, you know, this is like the hybrid between the elephant in the room and the black swan, which is totally unexpected, and etc. So basically, this was totally predictable, but yeah, well, we didn't really think of it. Do you think the pandemic and the climate crisis both reflect a total disconnection from the real world, leading to a total ignoring and lack of preparation of risks which are known, so to speak, right? And here we go to politics and technology, maybe.
Sorry, I was a bit thrown off because at the same time I started reading comments in the chat, which I shouldn't have.
No, you don't. No. Concentrate on the content. Joe is in charge of the chat. Anna is on it.
No, I'm curious what the disagreement.
Sure. You will have it all after all.
Okay, so back to politics and Corona and how we're basically handling the situation, correct?
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
Okay. Oh, I mean, you know, we're still in the middle of it, you know, like I feel like I'm watching a movie or a theater play, you know, like unfolding. Actually, this morning I woke up and I fell straight into an article by Naomi Klein in The Guardian, which was incredible because basically she pointed out how now New York City, together with Google, Eric Schmidt and Gates, are basically using this moment in time to fully digitalize New York, to digitalize our lives even more, to implement digital healthcare systems, etc. And she's really going into the, you know, just saying, like, according to her book, The Shock Doctrine, now she's basically moving forward saying, okay, now we're actually witnessing a technological shock doctrine.
Right.
So it is definitely in the absence of citizens to express their will in a time in which people are afraid. It is easy to basically now come in with a deus ex machina of technological solutions that are being now implemented. And let's not forget who's basically winning from the fact that we are all locked at home is food delivery services, Amazon, Netflix, Facebook,
Zoom.
You know, Zoom, hello.
Like, I know, we didn't want to use them, but we had to at the end. Okay, yeah.
Fine. I mean, all these digital tools are great. Don't get me wrong. The question is, when does technology start being just a tool for humans, and when are we basically determined by those tools? You know, like it's a fine line, and
Totally, yeah.
Behind it is always the money making machine. And just going back to VR, it's the same. It's not that VR doesn't have the potential; it still has it. But the monetization behind it, well, that was my experience. It was really hard for independent producers to basically get their content out. The monetization went super fast. The way that where the money went was very, very quickly, like very streamlined. So what we're experiencing is basically a lack of heteronomy, you know, of a multiplicity, because the platforms are just converging. And it's the same with what we're seeing now. I mean, everybody knows, you know, if you work in this field, tracing apps are so, you know, they constantly fail. It's, you know,
they're not developed yet. I mean, for now, for the virus at least, they're not even developed yet. I mean, in France, it's all postponed. In Germany, the same. Sorry.
They were super fast. They immediately put out a tracking app. I'm not against these things, but you know, it's different if politics are using tracking apps in order to determine human behavior, or if humans are using tools in order to be able to help each other in a situation. And that is just a big, I don't know if that is clear, but to me that's a really big difference. And because none of that is accurate, and it makes so many mistakes all the time.
Well, we could argue that
it told actually people that they got infected, and then it turned out they weren't because they were not located right with the GPS. It's yeah.
We could argue that behind the technology there is always a human programming it. But it reminds me of this New York Times article I was sending last week. Joe, maybe you can post it in the chat. It was called, I can't remember the title, but it was like, tech won't solve problems, but people will. So, I mean, I hope there are the people behind the technology at any case. So, do you think that we can change, or how we can change things so that our technology and our economy is more connected and aware of humanity or of non-human life also, because I mean, it's not only like human and the rest. I mean, with the zootic pandemic that we have right now, it is more obvious than ever. Maybe it's a good moment for us so that you can tell us a little bit more about your ÄRTH project. Can you tell us more about the project?
Sure. Let me think if I want to go into ÄRTH right now, because I still feel that I want to say something about. You know, I watched Westworld season 3 the other day, and I'm a really big fan of this show. And it's interesting because, you know, I grew up with science fiction, and I grew up with all these visions of the future, right? And and I was thinking most science fiction has actually has been created around a little bit before and after the Second World War. And that is what we mainly see in movies. And what it did is basically to try to extrapolate technological possibilities into the future in order to create cautionary tales. So now what we have done is we have basically over and over and over again visualized those cautionary tales. And what came out is only one singular vision of our future. And it's always the same, you know, it's always like an centralized AI-driven system that is either predicting pre-crime, as in Minority Report, or you know, or it's actually really interesting. In Westworld, is regulating human behavior based on data and then extrapolating their behavior into the future.
Black Mirror.
Black Mirror, of course. I mean, this is much more differentiated. Black Mirror is incredible, but ultimately the problem is that now we have a lot of people who are either for it or against it. Those who are for it are part of the monetization, are part in that business. Then there's a lot of people who are against it, but there's no alternative visions. It's really hard to move forward if we're always against something without having, and this is what I mean with heterotopias. You know, we have only one utopia, but we don't really have heterotopias. So in a way, maybe ÄRTH is an attempt to use technology in a way that it allows multiple, very different voices to describe their own ecosystems, to take power over their own ecosystems, and to basically maybe give us a view that right now we don't have. Because, you know, what we're doing right now, if we're honest with the satellites in the sky, is we're creating again one colonized world view. And, you know, images mean nothing, data means nothing. The question is who's interpreting that data? What are we doing with that data? You know, if it's only like guys in Silicon Valley or girls in working at Microsoft, you know, like, but if it's all like coming from a certain group of people and then interpreting what is biodiversity, what is the health of the planet in this and this and this location, then we will always describe the planet from one perspective. And we will never really learn what the perspective is of maybe a health, maybe we're looking at CO2 sequestration because it's a quantifiable measure. And it works for us because there's carbon bonds and carbon markets, you know, and we can understand this. So we can actually maybe evaluate a piece of land according to its carbon sequestration. But maybe if you speak to an indigenous group over thousands of years, they have a whole different idea of what healthy land is and healthy ecosystem is. And so ÄRTH is trying to somehow bring that knowledge in and to crowdsource an idea of a planet and actually to shed light in the places that right now are in the dark. And this is also something I really have to say, because social media is propagating this moment of Corona as a revival for nature, but it isn't. Because what is happening in the dark right now is we have the most rampant moment of deforestation in Australia, in the Amazon. Like right now, all the big polluters are remaining irregulated with us being at home and with everybody's just focusing on this one crisis. And so this is not a good moment for the planet, actually. And we don't have we kind of created, I feel, a panopticon that only allows us one view of the world instead of allowing to get in touch with voices that maybe could allow us a different view. And in a very big, you know, in a very high level, this is what ÄRTH is trying to solve.
I understand the mission of ÄRTH. This is great, but I think for all the participants here who don't know what it is it a platform? Is it something, is it an app? Is it something everybody can participate to, even everybody here? Like, what is it, which form does it have, and how does it work?
No, I'm always dancing around it because it's not published yet.
Yeah, well, we are between us, actually.
30, okay.
Yeah.
Well, it's an app. It's an app, and it's a model. It's a 3D model of the planet. It works in VR as well as on web and on mobile, and it will allow you to get directly in touch with people on the ground in remote places, and it will allow you to actually check and visualize impact data. And
so there is still VR in it. So I know that there is a debate coming up in the chat about VR. We're not going to avoid it, but there is still VR in it. So there is hope for all the VR experts here saying like, we want to discuss right now. So this is great. Yeah, I think this reminds me, or I mean, this leads actually like the empowerment, the community of this initiative. If everybody is going to do this as a group also, reminds me of what you were saying before yesterday on the Elinor Ostrom.
You know?
Yeah, which is great. I mean, she's the one who was, I mean, yeah, the basis was the commoning, or the commons at least. You know what? I was checking her out, and I didn't know she was only one of 2 women with a Nobel Prize in economics. I didn't know that.
She was the first one, and she
the first one.
Yeah, she got it when she was so old, and she was the first woman, and it's the most prestigious Nobel Prizes for economic sciences.
Absolutely.
And she just proved basically the tragedy of the commons that was put out by the Rand Corporation. And she basically showed, did all this research in which she showed that for example, the Maasai were able to never deplete their resource pools and live in absolute harmony in accordance with those resource pools, although they were also different tribes and hostile tribes and different groups, but they always managed to find a way not to deplete those resource pools. The moment that colonizers came in and kicked the Maasai off the land, those resource pools were depleted immediately. Yeah. And he basically warned of panaceas, like one remedy fits all. And she was really a big proponent for heteronomy and for a polycentric world in which we basically, people create their own governance systems on the ground and then basically converge into larger conversations from the bottom up.
Absolutely, striving for self-reliance and recommunalization, etc. This was a lot from her work. By the way, the second woman, I had to check it out because I was amazed because I didn't know. I mean, that's 80 Nobel Prizes in economics since '69. 2 women. The second one is a French one.
I know.
Yes, it's Esther Duflo, by the way, and it was last year. See, anyway, so great, good, but let's go maybe move a little bit more to the cultural production now. So we think it's debatable if we were saying if government's responses will allow a radical change. This is really debatable, but we can see these grassroots initiatives coming up. We can see these collectives, a new spirit of a decentralized collaboration coming up. I mean, we see this with here, I mean, first in the scientific collaboration, there is something coming up. There is solidarity. Here in Berlin, we have this queer solidarity in troubled times, which is a fantastic initiative. We have also the clubs, which is the DNA of Berlin, you know, like United We Stream. I learned yesterday only that you can even order a cocktail. I mean, I didn't know that. I don't know how they do that, but anyway, you can do that. And yeah, so that's a lot of things coming also in the cultural sector, allowing new forms. I'm thinking also there is a platform for theater online and streaming theater pieces in, I mean, like pre-recorded content. I mean, there is so much coming up. How do you see, have you observed any of the creative and cultural sectors, any initiatives that you like when you think like, yes, this is in the vein where you would like to see the future?
Not so much, actually. I feel, because, you know, I live in Berlin, I feel people are always like that here. When, you know, I mean, it doesn't matter, you know, now they do the same thing on the other side of the computer, but they always get organized. Like, there's so much going, like, I just have to leave the house, and Berlin has such a tradition and community activity. You know, like there's down the road, there's this place where you can put old books and get new ones or exchange them, or there's just so much going on all the time. And I think people just get creative with the tools that they have. But I also feel that people are starting more and more to complain that there's no alternative platforms. And I just wish that more people would just go out there and try and at least give it a try to create platforms that maybe have underlying different technological architecture and obey different rules. Of course, we can keep using all the existing platforms and still do our communities and our creativity and our coming together. But it would be actually interesting to go out and to use all the building blocks that exist. I mean, you can just go to open source libraries. There's so many incredible tools that have been created by coders that people can start using and actually to attempt to actually really create a new systems architecture. And I, you know, when I studied philosophy, I was always stuck at one point in post-structuralism. And it's always like, you always have to question the underlying structure. It's never what is there, you need to understand what are the conditions that make what we're having possible.
Sorry.
What we need to focus more on the architecture that are tools that allow us creative expression are built on, and we should actually look at those underlying tools and how we can change that. And that's like, an appel to all the coders and all the technical people out there.
Yeah. On a more techie level, actually, I'm seeing a lot in the film business, and I know we have a lot of film people here, that virtual production is something which is exploding even more right now to allow the restart of a film production, actually. So it's very interesting to see also with the merging with the games, etc. But I mean, this is also very collaborative, by the way, because it allows multidisciplines to get in this. But yeah, so we see a lot. Yeah, Joe, I think, has invited everyone. If you have an idea, if you saw something coming up, please post in the chat, as we will save the chat. But I think I would be ready to open up for Q&As. I know we have questions on VR, so I think we're going to take these ones. Sure. Joe, which questions would you suggest for Adina first?
I mean, I'd like to come back to this thing that Michelle brought up, and also another participant. Like, is VR like totally co-opted? Is it really gone now? Or is it like still possible to kind of do stuff? Like, what if you had maybe a different mechanism or a different, like you're saying, these different platforms and different approaches to VR? If it's structurally different, could it actually work? How do you feel about that?
I think it could. I mean, I'm still a big believer. I want the VR component in ÄRTH because I just really love immersion. But I just bought an Oculus Quest. I don't know why I bought it, to be honest. I don't know, like there's so much work to do. There's like this headset is never really, I have a small head and it's just like always pressing, it hurts a little bit. And then I go around, the content is really lame and the interactivity is like for 5-year-olds, and it just needs more force of creators behind it for sure. And I mean, I haven't given up on that medium, but we need a lot of development on the hardware side. It's an expensive medium, let's put it that way. And everything that's expensive needs big money. And as soon as big money comes in, it's being co-opted. It's very hard for artists and for people, like to just tinker around with it.
Sorry, I don't know who asked the question. In case you want to interact directly, please put your camera on, wave so that we can see you, and then unmute yourself, and then you can ask Adina directly. We don't want to have everything through the chat. The chat is a great way to remember your questions during the talk. Sorry, Adina, you said?
There's somebody who's called Tyler Durden. I like it. From Fight Club.
Okay, so who would like to ask their question directly, maybe to Adina? Michelle, are you still in? Yes, I see you, Michelle, but okay, no, maybe not.
I go into the chat, but I agree, my Oculus is also...
Yes, I'm here,
Okay, wonderful, yes. Do you want to show yourself?
Yes.
Good. Here you are. Hello, Michelle, hi.
I'm sorry, I'm fixing a problem with my printer, and I'm online with the help desk, so I came out and I didn't hear the last 5 minutes. I just wanted to react to the first remark about, you know, VR being this really dull place where there are only like silly games and zombies. I disagree with that. I think it's an amazing creative place, and more so. I find that even, you know, major pieces of work like Half-Life Alyx are incredible, even though they're games, yes, but they're so well made. I think they can help people embracing VR the same way that people are excited with Beat Saber, but on a creative level and more confidential. We're seeing an incredible amount of talent being invested in making either story narrative based pieces, but also purely visual and interactive. So I find that I'm personally interested in this diversity that you are promoting, Irina. I'm interested in seeing how it can also be promoted through the creative angle, and how in the immersive world, you know, fighting against global warming and having a diverse approach to these issues, it can be also done through collaborations with creative artists that are so that it doesn't become. There's one thing that I'm struck by right now in the field is how politically correct sometimes we all become, and it's as if we always needed to be on good side of the fence to talk about things. And I think it's time to complexify and do things in a more diverse way. And so when we talk about diversity, it's not just diversity of genres, of sexes, of you know, races, etc. It's also diversity of approaches and points of views, and on a creative level.
No, I 100% agree with everything that you said. And I think that this is also what I'm trying to get to, is to allow different thoughts, different voices, different stories to emerge. And I'm very well aware of the incredible creative potential of people and humans using VR. I actually just only recently tried Lone Echo, and I was really surprised how beautiful the story is and how far it has gone in. I think my point is just to always question the underlying mechanisms, because those are still released on platforms that are doing massive data harnessing. And you know that in a headset you can just gather so much more data from the users in the headset, from you know, eye tracking to emotional reactions. And I just think that we should free up those spaces. And the reason why this overly political correctness is happening has also something to do with the rules of the platforms that we're using. You know, like I would love a VR capability in Reddit, for example. I'm sure that people would be much more creative. You would have many more voices. My critique is not so much towards the creatives and the medium, but much more on the conversion of this medium existing.
The few platforms that are available. I think this is also an issue about distribution, which is a key issue right now. You know, diversifying distribution options, mostly for independent makers. So, but that's another topic.
Absolutely, I agree.
I think we will have the topic when we focus on virtual reality. I think we will screen the next talks after the Q&As, and so that you can know. I think, Michelle, you are on the 10th of June. Can it be? Anna, do you know the date? You remember? VR,
I think we have maybe a VR panel on the 10th of June. Yeah, at the end we'll show, we've got some upcoming talks, so we'll share those with you guys.
Yes, wonderful. Do we have another question for Adina? Anyone? I don't see anyone. Everybody put their camera off, probably like multitasking, but still they're there. So this is great.
I have a question, maybe, if no one else.
Oh, you go.
I'm wondering about, like, I feel like in my experience in the design community, and especially, there's a strong awareness of like decentralization as an idea, and like this idea of building platforms that you don't just focus on the content, but it's the logic and the structure of the platform. But I know that you work kind of not only in this creative space, but also with like really techie people. And so I wonder, like, how is the kind of the conception of decentralization in this space? Do people see it as like a kind of something that could be actually a political tool, like something that's emancipatory? Or do people actually see like decentralization as a kind of more like it's like a business tool, or it's a different model? Like, what is the kind of culture of decentralization in these more techie fields that you also connect with?
I don't think anybody sees it as a business tool, really. I think people who are in there are really trying to really reshape our vision of the internet and of our digital lives and our collaborations. Because, you know, with the first internet, we had a different idea. It was about empowering everybody to have access to all kinds of information and to create a global community. And now we're basically, you know, just products shopping around. And so the entire decentralized community is really trying to think of a different architecture, like technical architecture that allows us to empower people how to own their own data with private keys, for example. This is something that's very interesting for VR, but also for medical records. I mean, I can give you an example, but if you go to the doctor right now, you tell them your medical history, they put everything into the system that they're working with. You know, the data entry is standardized towards this system. Now you move a city, and now you find a new doctor, and then you start the whole thing again. All that knowledge is lost. So it's also inefficient. The way now our digital lives are working with the standardized enterprise tools that we are using is also highly inefficient, because that data is lost. Now you go to a new doctor, you enter everything again in a new format, because they're working with another system. It can never be consolidated. And everybody now owns pieces of you. And if you're unlucky, that data is sold to pharmaceutical companies, etc. Right? And so the idea with a private key, for example, would be that we consolidate and we standardize all data entries in the medical field. And now what we have is, now we can learn. Now basically the data is linked, and everywhere you go in the world, it can be basically retrieved, but only through you. You are the one who allows people to open up certain data about you, or to keep it closed, and the data doesn't get copy-pasted and sold without your knowledge. So now we have both. We have a data ownership that is going through you, and at the same time, we're learning from all the data that you have entered, and now we actually can make this data useful. It's the same with environmental data. Right now, all environmental data is stored in different systems by different foundations and different institutes, and everybody has their own interpretations of it. It's not consolidated, nobody can learn about it, and nothing is transparent. And so this is something that the open source community, the decentralized community is starting to look at in order to how to innovate it, make it more secure, more privatized, and at the same time, more efficient in learning from that data.
That makes sense, yeah. I just saw that, Kathleen, you also mentioned a project. Did you want to actually share a little bit about this? So you've shared the link in the chat. Would love to hear about it from you personally.
I'm personally not involved yet, but I'm trying to help there. So my colleagues who, I only joined the company, right? So, and I will join another talk on VR, but in the meantime, my company did that project, or does that project, Lab of Tomorrow, New Ways to New Business. And basically what it does, it's, so we have that hashtag ÄRTH versus virus, a program based on the experience of the Lab of Tomorrow that is gaining over the last 3 years, conducting open innovation processes that address global development challenges. So we are basically asking all around the world to participate. So we have in 9 co-creative and open innovation processes with 175 participating companies. We are going into that project and see, like, you can hand in your technology if you think that you contribute with that to the coronavirus. It could be anything. For instance, we also have a our own spin-off called Food Companions, who were part of a hackathon over the weekend, and they came up with one idea that was the pickle hub. So for instance, in around Berlin, you have the strawberry farmers who can't deliver their strawberries anymore to the restaurants, as the restaurants are closed. So they don't want to destroy the harvest. So what are they doing? They have to find companies who help them to pickle it or to dry them and so forth. And the hub would help to bring those companies together. So the farmer with the companies who are helping him with the harvest so that he doesn't have to throw it away and that he's not actually dying, like his business is not dying. So things like that.
Amazing.
And that's in the link you posted, Catherine?
Yes. I could only find really fast the link that we posted on LinkedIn. So then you find the 2 pages where it's short description.
Great.
And I also sent that to my colleagues in India, where I know the lady who is in charge for a startup program for German Indian commerce, where they basically help also restaurants and other farmers, but also like everybody who's right now affected, and they see which companies could participate in that.
Cool. Do we have another question? I'm checking everyone. No? Well, Adina, thank you very much for sharing your insights with us. I guess we will pursue the conversation on the ୟାRTH, at least on the 10th of June. What I could do is I could share my screen and show you the next one